My name is Ensiyah, and you're watching Social Chai with Ensiyah.
Hello, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of Social Chai with Ensiyah. The topic for today is education in Pakistan. Pakistan has the highest number of out of school children worldwide after Nigeria, approximately 22.7 million Pakistani children, 5 to 16. This is a very concerning statistic and issue, and that's why I've invited Ensiyah Ali to help us explore and learn the whys and hows surrounding this issue. So let's get Ensiyah on.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. So Ensiyah, can you give us like a brief introduction of who you are and what's your background for people who may not know you?
I doubt anyone does, but so I've just graduated from King's College London with a degree in politics, and currently I'm working at TCF Pakistan. So I've just started working there, which is why a lot of the things I say will just be through kind of an interest in education and academic work around education, or the kind of stuff that I've been seeing there. Um, So yeah, I've always had an avid interest in education, and Pakistan is really interesting because what you see kind of on the surface level is not actually what's going on inside at a classroom level, which is why despite having a lot of the financial capabilities and reforms, we're not actually making any progress.
Right. So to start this off, I'm going to throw a very heavy question your way. Can you briefly just tell me, after more than half a century of independence, nearly half of Pakistan's population is still illiterate. Why is that? It's a lot to unpack. I'm sorry, but go for it.
So I mean that's interesting. That's right as well. So our the number of children that we have in school right now have stagnated since 2010 at 57%, right? And a lot of so we think that the solution to this is double the budget. We're not putting enough money to address the problems in education, etc. But we have put in money. So in 2010, our budget was somewhere around $3.5 billion, and in 2017, it was like $8.6 billion. So we have doubled the budget. And Pakistan's budget since 2010 has grown by 17.5% every year as well. So, and even this year, our federal budget was, it was somewhere 83 something billion, which was 2.3% of our GDP. And that's again something that we're called out on, is that not enough of our GDP is, going into education. But GDP is actually quite a bad marker for us because we don't recover enough of our GDP in taxes for it to be spent on education. So it's not actually money that can be spent. And we're also like huge recipients of aid. I know we're the biggest recipient of UK aid in the world. At one point, we were the second biggest recipient of US aid as well. So we have the money, and we have been putting in reforms that are supposed to make literacy better. But like you said, there is illiteracy there. And even it's not just people who are out of school, it's children who are in school. So after like a third grader, less than half of third graders are actually able to read a sentence in Urdu. 30% can write a sentence in Urdu after like 5 years of schooling, and 11% in English. So we do have a crisis of out of children school. So we have dropout rates, but our crisis is actually of children who are in school and they're not learning, because primary enrollment is actually 98%. So out of the 22.8 billion children that are out of school, only 5 million are primary children. So children are dropping out between the ages of 5 and 16, which is where we see our problem. So our problem is actually children who are in school, and we have to figure out why they're dropping out. And I mean, this education system is holding us back. Education is important studies all over the world will just show you that education is so important, to grow your GDP, to further your economy, basic things like that. A sound education system is important for the functioning of any nation.
Right.
So I guess we need to be looking at then, what are we doing that's not working, right? And one of the biggest things that we're doing that's really not working is our curriculum. So when we have the money and we have, resources to put in to make the education system work, our resources are essentially being wasted. And one of the reasons is that we have an inherently complex curriculum that is in English. Like, we have an aspirational curriculum that's in English, whereas most children don't speak English at home. They don't speak English, around them, etc. So it just makes you question, like, why your curriculum is in English when children are just like, they don't know this language, right? So what children go and do is that they see like a sentence, and they memorize it. And if you can repeat the sentence back, that means that you know how to read. So there's schools, there's teachers, everything, but there's no learning. There's no actual education or comprehension going on. Like in one of the primary schools, children say CAT, Billy. So
Right.
they're learning these sounds, whereas they're not doing, like, how you say at to cat is called decoding. And that's how you
Right.
learn phonics. That's not being done. So they are obviously not going to learn, CAT, cat. Like, some
Right.
children can read the word Pakistan in Urdu, but they can't read the word Pak, like if it's away from Pakistan.
Right.
So your curriculum needs to be in the mother tongue or in a language that's most familiar to the children. And in Pakistan, another issue comes up is that you're like, all right, fine, let's have the curriculum in Urdu then. Except a very small percentage of the population even speaks Urdu, like at home.
Right.
People use a lot of obscure languages, a lot of like really niche regional languages.
Right.
But there is solutions to them, especially since so education was, as you know, it's a provincial thing now, which is again why the budget isn't completely, accurate, because in the federal budget, you're not actually counting the provincial budget. So, education is provincialized, so you can make your curriculum in the mother tongue. You need, I know TCF's curriculum is how you first kind of, your medium instruction is in the mother tongue, so like in the obscure language.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you maybe give us a little bit information on what TCF is and like the organization itself stands for?
Yeah, of course. So TCF is the Citizens Foundation. It's Pakistan's largest NGO, and it's a system of it's a system of schools. So it provides education to the least privileged in Pakistan. But it isn't just set up schools. It's also in it makes curriculums. It makes digital, they have other stuff going on. They have community projects going on. So TCF is, I think, a great example of an organization that's looking at the actual problems that the school systems are facing and finding solutions for them.
Right. So something I found really interesting and I want you to talk more about is that you talked about curriculums, right? So I found that the school curricula in the last few years, the task of designing the school curricula itself has been delegated to provinces rather than, on a federal level. So why is that we still don't see like the customization to dialects and different languages in schools still?
Well, I mean, it's a difficult task because we actually don't have textbooks to teach these children, that curriculum. Our textbooks are still in English or maximum in Urdu. We just haven't come out with those reforms. I know that the new single national curriculum that they're putting out is set to, be in regional languages, or at least it picked that up in its second draft or something. But that reform just hasn't come about. And
Right.
the reason that it's so important to do that is because if you keep shoving English or Urdu or a language that you're just not familiar with on a child who's, hearing it for the first time, you're basically hampering its cognitive, social, and academic capabilities, because then that child has no mode of expression.
Right.
And teaching Urdu is also like, it's tricky because, so in Urdu, we don't really have, we like drop the vowels as a stylistic choice. So, when you spell cub, kaf, be, so
Right.
it's, right? So you and I know it's cub, K-A-B, cub. Whereas
Right.
someone who's seeing that word for the first time doesn't know if it's geb or kub or kib.
Right.
Which is why, teaching in Urdu is also not a viable solution.
Right.
So I think the first kind of solution that everyone needs to be going towards on like a policy level is to ensure that teaching is done in your mother tongue or the language that's most familiar to you. Because once you're able to do that, and you have like a foundation in your mother tongue, then you can introduce English, and the child will actually be much more likely to learn English that way as well. Because yes, English is our mode of communication in an official way.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's move on to some more questions. You talked about the federal budget, and how essentially, while we are allocating a decent amount to education, it's not really the federal budget at hand. It's other things like the school curricula. Can you mention more reasons other than just like the lack of accommodation in the curriculum itself?
Of course. I mean, we can look at Balochistan actually. I think regional kind of disparity is also a big issue. So Balochistan has probably the I think the greatest regional disparity within education in all of Pakistan. And the reason for that is because the schools over there are in like a terrible state. There's a lot of security issues and law and order issues that have gone on the past couple of years. The American drone attacks, rebel groups in Balochistan, the interference of the army. So that's kind of left like I think it's 1.7 million children out of school.
Right.
And in Balochistan, 52% of schools don't have electricity, 57% of schools don't have drinking water, 46 don't even have boundary walls. So while the money is there, it's we're wasting resources because 80% of your budget actually goes into teacher staff and like salaries.
Right.
And it's not actually going in new development projects.
Right.
And this has just been historically what's going on. We
So-
can't like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let's from like where you talked about how 50% of the budget is actually going to administrations, teachers, staff, faculty. Let's dive into like the corruption within the education system, because I know there's a lot, especially in the public education system. Can you maybe inform us on that?
Right. So I think we can see the corruption like on election day when schools are made into polling stations and teachers are electoral officers. So that should just tell you how politicized the education department is. And when your teachers are the people who are there standing, to see if someone is voting or not, the MNA is taking an interest in that. So yeah, we have a very politicized education system. Education department system. The department is also huge. At one point, it was called an employment agency because politicians would, if they wanted someone, as a favor to give them a stable government job, they would essentially just put them as a teacher or someone in the education department because it gave you that salary.
Right.
Politicians also were able to allocate 5 teachers from their constituency. So they allocated those 5 teachers as people who would bring them like the maximum amount of votes. Other than that, there's things going on like politicians are able to transfer teachers. Government teachers actually make more than private teachers do in Pakistan, which is why at one point people would be kind of given the position of a government teacher, and then they would kind of sublet that position to someone and then go off in their own lives because they had enough money to do so.
That's crazy. I had no idea about that. I'm sure a
And
lot of us had no idea
yeah,
about that.
and in Sindh and Balochistan especially. So one of the things that you need to see when you're making a school is that it has to be on government land. Except government land is either in like really remote areas where there aren't kids to come to school, and where there are kids, there are already schools there. So a lot of landowners donate their land to the government, and then in return they're given like a government salary and a government position, and they become like the chokidars, except they don't actually do anything at the school. And in
Right.
Sindh and Balochistan, there's this horrible thing that happens is that so the government gives money to build the school, and the landowner uses that school as his own kind of private guest house.
Right.
And
I've heard of that before.
yeah, and he also so the government has to appoint a teacher and a chowkidar. They have to pay their salaries, and the landowner also uses them as kind of their own personal services, and he kicks everyone else out of school.
So Fatma Alisa, the textbooks used in government schools are so outdated. I attended a few MCAT classes and had to study from the pre-med textbooks for the medical entrance exam, and the informations in the books was straight up wrong. I actually empathize with that because I personally volunteered at a public school. And first of all, they weren't enough resources. Children literally had to sit in groups of three with torn-up books. And like you talked about, the ratification and the memory-based learning before, that's exactly what was done. So yeah, it's horrible. So let's talk about the alarming rates of dropouts in the system. There's obviously a problem with retention that we have. So can you please talk a little bit about that and possible solutions to counter the issue of retention? And within the question, if you could address the rampant gender disparities with boys outnumbering girls at every stage in the education system.
So yeah, we are behind on textbooks. I know that the USA textbooks have actually helped because they've kind of designed their own. NGOs like TCF are also designing their own textbooks, which are more updated. I think what the government is trying to do right now is also kind of revamp its textbooks, except it's introducing a lot of Islamic material, which is problematic at many stages.
Right.
We haven't updated our textbooks. I know that there is one school that I also personally visited that was actually using a textbook from near independence time.
Wow. Okay. That's
So
crazy.
yeah, so in terms of the dropout rate, yeah, the dropout rate significantly increases when after kind of a primary school level.
Right.
There was a survey done at TCF where principals could predict dropout based on gender, based on low-income families, based on low academic performance, and based on if a child was able to provide a second outcome for the family, and also based on where the child lived, as in could the child get to school. And when it comes to dropout rates, I think again the biggest thing would be that children aren't learning. So parents don't see the point in sending a child to school if it's not learning anything, and that child could be used to generate a second income in the household.
Right.
So when children start learning, they're more likely to be put in school. There are also other reasons for children dropping out, things like, and this applies to mostly girls as well. It applies to both boys and girls because we're not doing a great job for either, but largely, girls are dropping out for these reasons. A lot of people think that like the average Pakistani parent doesn't want their daughter to go to school, whereas Pew conducted a survey and 86% of Pakistani parents said that a girl's education was as important as a boy's. 5% said it was even more, and only 9% of our population said that boys' education was more important than girls. So parents want to send their girls to school, and girls want to go to school much more enthusiastically than boys do as well.
Right.
So the demand is there, the supply is not. Parents
Right.
are very they're careful of sending their girls to school, number one, because of traveling issues. And this is for boys as well. So a lot of your cost goes into traveling, taking a bus every day, taking a taxi every day to school. A lot of people can't afford that. So we need to have schools in community locations. again, as girls grow up, parents are not comfortable letting their girls, knowing our country's kind of security situation, walk to school, long miles in bus, etc. every day, and they're much more comfortable if the school was in like a short walking distance to their house. So
Right.
we need schools in more communities, more rural communities especially.
Right.
Another issue is that a lot of schools don't have the infrastructure for girls. They don't have like separate toilets for teachers, boys and girls. They don't have places where girls can drink water, or girls can go, just kind of, go to the
Right.
bathroom, things like that. Basic infrastructure you need for women. Nurses are actually very important for girls at schools as well. So schools don't have that. Parents are also, they don't send girls to school because they can't pee in the ground like boys do. Another reason is that, girls are, their safety is threatened when there are a lot of male teachers at school. So parents
Right.
don't feel comfortable sending their girls to a school where there are a lot of male teachers, which is why you need girls-only schools. And in the private sector, there are far more female teachers than male teachers. In the government sector, because a teaching job is a government job and offers you a stable salary, men outcrowd that. Again, for multiple reasons. They're just better at getting it. They know a lot of more people. They're more likely to get it. Employment, anyways, is more beneficial towards a man when you're hiring someone.
Right.
People are more likely to hire men, and
Right.
which is
I find that really interesting because generally, if you look in like the global north, the stereotype of like, especially in jobs, like of a teacher or someone who's in liberal studies or arts, is usually associated to women rather than men. And that's why I personally feel like we see them more in the private sector. And other than that, touching upon also the mention you made of second income. So, do you think if the government provided some kind of socioeconomic welfare or a better system of welfare for these families, that the out of school rate would drop?
um so that's debatable. I don't think that it would drop significantly, even if it would, because the problems would still be there. A lot of, public schools are free, so you're not really spending money on them. A lot of kids work after school as well and work before school. Um, so the problems of actually sending your child to school and having them actually learn throughout the day, um, those wouldn't be solved by doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so a child would still, like, the dropout rate probably wouldn't drop so significantly as we think it would if they were supplemented, because it's not like parents don't want their children to go to school. Most parents
Right.
do want their children. They would prefer that their child is in school.
Right.
When they see that their child isn't learning, and again, like, I just feel like we have like a very, like, this image of an average Pakistani parent that wants to kick their daughter out of school and wants to use their child for a second income. Most of the population isn't like that. They
Right.
actually want their daughters to be in school. They want their children to be in school. They would much rather prefer that.
Mhm.
So I think unless we address the crisis of children who are already in school, we won't be able to lower the dropout rate.
So, do you think this is more of like, for example, you talked about how children don't have public schools in close distances. Do you think that we need to work on a more urban planning platform in terms of like how we plan our towns and how we plan our rural villages, where we make sure that villages or like certain sectors and areas have schools present for sure?
Yeah, 100%. Until we do that, there's no way, access to schooling will increase. Um, so that is something that needs to be taken into regard, and it's not at a government level because no one is adhering to these kind of guidelines. Like, I think the only guideline the government has put is that in a 50-kilometer radius there should be children present, and even that isn't really adhered to.
That's crazy. So Faizu Tube says, why is Pakistan's public school system so behind? I think we're addressing that right now.
I think that's what the
That's what
entire thing is
that's
about.
what the entire show is about. And when we talk about public school systems, right? So there's an obvious disparity in terms of like information or in terms of curricula between private schools, public schools, and even dini madaris. We have different types of institutions.
Yeah.
Do you think that the government should implement certain policies in place that bring some kind of uniformity in terms of the curriculum and in terms of what we're all learning?
Um, Uniformity can help, but Pakistan is very diverse. Like I said, like uniformity might lead to problems like everybody learning in English or everybody learning in Urdu. But uniformity in the sense that our curriculum becomes overall more simplified for primary children. Uniformity in the sense that everyone needs to learn, from these approved textbooks, which is again something kind of, it's a gray area because when the government approves textbooks, it could go down two roads. It could go down, this is great and it adheres to a great standard, or this is some content that's like brainwashing kids, like our Pak studies textbooks and our Islamia textbooks, which are just kind of a little bit biased and present a
Right.
strange things.
Right.
So,
But I personally think that we see that in all educational institutions like throughout the world, like especially when it comes to history and especially when it comes to religion, I feel like that things do tend to be biased. But I understand what you're saying. So just like going off of that, what do you think that we as a public can do, or aspiring individuals who want to work in Pakistan and who want to stop the brain drain from happening? What do you think we can do to help the public schooling system in Pakistan?
So this is great because historically, without elite interest, there hasn't been major education reform, being able to happen. In Sweden, they only achieved public literacy when the church told parents that you need to make sure that every child knows how to read the Bible in Swedish. Similarly, in America, when a lot of immigrants came in, they needed to ensure that everyone was assimilated to like one national identity. So that's how they used, the public education system, and they really revamped it, and they made sure that people were going to the same schools. So again, that was like an elite interest. In Pakistan, elites are emigrating. It means that elites either believe that they're leaving or they want to leave, and they don't really have an interest in the reforms and the policies that are there for these schools. And this is beyond just philanthropy. This is beyond just donating. Like there's a policy that for private schools, 10% of your seats need to go to someone from a disadvantaged background. And people don't know about this law. People don't know that you have to enforce it because they're not interested.
Right.
There needs to be more advocacy for these laws. There needs to be more accountability. There are like beautiful USAID schools in Pakistan. They're like just shut because there's some red tape issues. The government hasn't given permission to open them. There's disputes on land, and I think like 10 meters away there are schools where like 50 kids are crowded into a classroom. So
Right.
there needs to be accountability. That's why how we say that private schools are like doing much better than public schools. It's because the parents at every stage hold the school accountable, whether
Right.
that's teachers or the curriculum or the exams or what is my child doing, what is my child learning. You need to start holding the government accountable for the policies that it puts in, because the reforms are there, the policies are probably there, even like the regional policy, like the regional language policy is coming into play. But how far is that going to be held accountable?
Right. There's no enforcement.
There needs to be an elite interest in improving our education system, is what
Right.
I would need to do.
So how do you think this elite interest is like, how do we attract the elite back to Pakistan? Because I understand that Imran Khan has a plan to bring back overseas Pakistanis, right? He's trying to engage them. But how do you think we're going to like work about this? Because personally, in my experience, like all the public schooling or like the decent schooling that I've seen in Pakistan is mostly overtaken by NGOs, and the government isn't doing the best job. And I don't think a country should be run by non-governmental organizations. You know,
Yeah.
you're a country governed by a government. So how do you think we work towards that?
I mean, I don't know if anyone's really been able to figure that out. People at the elite in Pakistan, as you know, and I know that you've ranted about in many, many situations,
Right.
there just needs to be, I would say, complete assimilation that
Right.
of priorities,
Hmm.
of aspirations. You know, like even the English thing that I was saying, you know, like kids, even in public schools, they say that we want to learn in English. Parents want their kids to learn in English. So there's a mindset issue that's going on. You
Right.
know, the elite need to, I mean, of course, it has to do with the economy and the security and the kind of economic advantages that you have, you know, going out of the country and sending money back in. That is there, that is valid.
Right.
But there are a lot of kids like you and me who have the privilege of coming back, who have the privilege of working in Pakistan, working for Pakistan. And
Right.
I would encourage, I guess, you know, kids who are in their 20s and are looking at their first few jobs or looking, you know, at where should I work, what should I do, come back, work here,
Right.
um, because you are at a place where you have the privilege to give back. So
Right.
instead of using that privilege, if you, I know a lot of us are, can be supported, or at least our rent is paid for because we can live in our parents' house in Pakistan or our grandparents' house in Pakistan. So if you have that privilege, um, please come back, work for us,
Use it.
work for Pakistan, use it. Don't go to a company to make more money for them. You know, don't pay
Right.
taxes in another country. Come back because things. It's a long, long, long road, but things will change if that starts to happen. If you need political will to make things work, and we need to start seeing more of that in Pakistan.
Right. And I personally, I think we also, the government and the people, I feel like need to really look at the bigger picture in the sense that 64% of our population is under 30. We have like this surging youth. And if we educate it, like the economic benefits to it are endless. Like you wouldn't even have to leave Pakistan essentially.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of this. In fact, I would recommend everyone to watch it. There's this TED talk by this man called Dr. Amar Ali Jan, which he gave at Central Punjab University. He himself is like an alumni of Cambridge, and he came back and he taught at Punjab University, and he mentioned the exact same things that you were talking about. He was talking about how he was teaching Marxist like books on Marxism, but in English, and the children would literally have to work day and night to translate the books with their dictionaries. And while some lost hope and dropped out, others did try, but that retention rate is very, very low. So I feel like this is a common sentiment among people who are willing to come back to Pakistan. But I also feel like it can be very depressing coming back because change is very gradual and change is very slow. But I think because of that, we need to start now. Um, so yeah, any parting words, anything you want to say before we end the show?
Um, just that there needs to be an elite interest to change the education system. So anyone who's able to watch this, anyone who has access to internet in Pakistan right now, who is sitting in another country somewhere in the world, if you can do something, if you can muster the political will to come back and change things, please do.
Right. Does TCF have any donation portals or
You
anything
do,
like
yes.
that?
You can go on their website, and you can donate from there. They also have some great community projects you can get involved in. You can volunteer if you can't donate at the moment. So yes, please come. TCF is doing some great things. It's addressing the issues right now that Pakistan is facing at a very classroom level and at a structural level. So yeah, if you, especially with Muharram and Zilhaj and everything coming up, if you want to donate and give sadaqah somewhere, I would 100% recommend TCF as a place.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us, Ensiyah. It was a great pleasure talking
You
to
too.
you. And yeah, and the audience, I know most of our audience is upper middle class or just upper class. So definitely, echo this everywhere, share this. This will be available on YouTube after the live session is over. But yeah, that's it for today. Allah Hafiz, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Right.